I can hear me better? Oh, yes. I'd say I better be quiet for a minute until he gets that turn. Oh, you got to turn down. Okay. Why that order? Why that order of life, then liberty, then pursuit of happiness? That's just random. Here's 3 key issues we want to write down in this document. Oh, no. Why was life at the top of the list? Samuel Adams, one of the founding fathers, he said that these are listed in order of priority. Life is the first priority. So why do people think, when it talks about life in the Declaration of Independence, that it's not talking about abortion? Oh, Thomas Jefferson was passing anti-abortion laws in Virginia as governor. James Wilson, who's James Wilson? Oh, he's just a signer of the Declaration and the Constitution. Oh, he just started the first law school in America. You think he might know something about the law? Oh, it's more than that. He was on the original Supreme Court. Oh, it's more than that. He gave lectures on law. In this particular lecture that I'm going to give you a quote out of, notice the title. It's on the natural rights of individuals. Quote, this is what he said. Human life from its commencement is to its close is protected by the common law. In the contemplation of law, in other words, in this law, life begins when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. In other words, when you can first detect there's life in the womb, that's when life started and that's when it's protected. By the law, that life is protected. John Witherspoon, just another signer of the Declaration, he explained there's a big difference between those people who had certain laws about life over in Europe versus laws about life here in America. And it touched directly on the abortion issue. He said it touched on the abortion issue. He says that in Europe thinks the parents create life, therefore the parents can kill life. He said, but in America, that's not so. We know that God creates life. Yes, the parents are involved. Okay. God creates life, and only Him and His laws can say when it's okay to take life. So again, why was life then, and why should life today be at the top of the list? If we have a candidate for office today, and they won't protect your first right, right to life, you think they're going to protect your other rights? You see, people who are pro-abortion, they also think wrong on these other issues. Other issues such as marriage, the sanctity of the home, or what's your rights to do with your property. It's your property, right? You should be able to do what you want to with it, not socialism. In fact, technically speaking, we go to a whole lesson on socialism. Jesus called it evil, but that's another issue. By the way, for those people who care about economics, did you ever realize that 70% of the government's budget is there for immorality or issues that can be handled under morality? Now that's if you remove the defense budget. What's left, 70% touches on morality issues. If you want more details on that, the small print gives you the details. Now, where do you get your news? Or, more importantly, where do your neighbors get your news? Where do they get their news? Well, you can go to this particular link you see at the top, sherbold.com/news, okay? But did you know that over 80% of the news media elite who are in charge of the media, in charge of the polls, are anti-Christian? Well, wait a second. 75 to 82% of Americans claim to be Christians. Yeah. You see, send your neighbors and yourself to better news sources, such as you see at the beginning of this page. And on the back, it has some nice links I'll tell you about in a minute. But I want you to read this for yourselves. New York Times reporter Steve Roberts said, I worked for the New York Times for 25 years. I could probably count on one hand in the Washington Bureau of the New York Times people who would describe themselves as people of faith. 75% of Americans, he can only find 5 out of hundreds. What about this? On the social issues, gay rights, gun control, abortion, and environmental regulation, among others, if you think the Times, the New York Times, if you think the Times plays it down the middle on any of them, you've been reading the paper with your eyes closed. Who's that quote from? The New York Times public editor. You see, even on economic issues, if you want lower spending, you don't want the government to be big government, that kind of stuff, where your candidate stands on life will sometimes, quite often, tell you where he also stands on these other issues. By the way, we can prove all this. Why? Because the Library of Congress monitors every single vote, except the voice votes, I guess. If there's 76% on life issues, then they're usually on these other biblical topics about 70%, even some on economics. Now, someone might ask, is there any correlation between the turnout of people who call themselves Christians and the outcome of an election? I'm glad you asked. David Green, this particular guy, ran down in Texas. He lost his first election by 20 votes. 20 out of 30,000? And the next election he won by 36 votes. So yeah, sometimes every single vote counts, doesn't it? But is there any correlation between Americans who carry Christian-type values into the elections? Well, let's go to 1992 to 1996. A 17% decrease in Christian voter turnout. 1996 to 2000, it got worse. They lost another 23% on top of it. That's a 40% loss in just 8 election cycles. You're losing about 10% every 2 years in an election cycle. So what were the results? Remember, Proverbs 29:2, when the righteous are in authority, people rejoice. When the wicked man rules, the people groan. In those years, we could not even get partial birth abortion ban signed into law. What? You see, it's not the pro-abortion people who are going to elect pro-abortion, pro-life candidates, right? So a lot of efforts went out there to try to get people in the 2002 election to at least go vote and use their biblical principles to do so. Okay. So let us use what the polls call an evangelical voter. This is all a bunch of political terminology. What's an evangelical voter? Well, evangelical voter is described as one who says, I, at least once per week, go to church. At least once per week, I pray. At least once per week, I read my Bible. That's an evangelical voter. And they also say that they had a life-changing experience with Jesus. Well, we know what that usually means, but never mind. You get the point, okay? So out of 300 million Americans, how many are evangelical? 60 million. But in the year 2000, only 1 in 4 voted. That's just 25%. 24 million aren't even registered to vote. If the evangelicals would even show up, we wouldn't have a culture war. It's over, folks. No culture war. You see, these people who call themselves Christians totally ignore what they've heard 1,000 times. They're supposed to be salt and light in the culture. Yeah, they ignore that. But in 2002, we had a 2%. Remember, there's a lot of effort put into it. Had a 2% uptick. But wait a second. A 2% uptick instead of a trending 10% loss is a 12% difference, isn't it? And this is an off-election year. This isn't the presidential election year. It goes down during the years usually, but you had a 2% uptick. What happened? So I'll tell you the difference between the presidential election years and the non-presidential election years. You can see those drops. But this went 2% up in evangelical voters. Out of every 100 Americans, out of the evangelicals, 41% said abortion is what drove my vote. And 23 were pro-life and 16 were pro-abortion. So I guess that wasn't evangelicals, was it? That's out of 100 Americans. Sorry about that. So out of 100 Americans, 41 said abortion drives my vote. 23 for life, 16 against life. That's a 7% advantage. Most elections are decided by a lot less than 7%, aren't they? 2002 results, 54 U.S. freshman congressmen. That's a little larger than typical. Guess what? 36 were pro-life. That is 67% pro-life. 10 U.S. freshman senators, 8 pro-life, pro-family, pro-faith. That's 80%. What about 2004? A 93% increase in Christian voter turnout. we'd gone from 15 million to 29.8 million. That's still less than half, but boy, is that an improvement. 42% of the voters identified abortion as the most important issue to them. 25% for it, 13% against it. I'm sorry, 25% for pro-life, 13% for pro-death. That's a 12% advantage. So what was the results? 40 new U.S. congressmen, 25 pro-life, 63%. 9 U.S. senators, 78% pro-life. So over 2 elections, we got 94 freshmen who went to the House, 65% pro-life. 19 freshmen to the Senate, 15 were pro-life, 79%. So what's the bottom line? Does that really make any difference in our culture? Since 1973, Roe versus Wade decision, not a single legislative bill has been passed to put restrictions on abortion. Yeah, there's been a few trying to limit some funding, and some presidents did some things on funding, but nothing to limit the restrictions on abortion. So this Congress, 2004, is the first since Roe versus Wade to pass 4 major standalone pro-life laws: Infants Born Alive Protection Act, Unborn Victims of Violence Act, Partial Birth Abortion Ban, and Fetal Farming Ban. Why didn't the media tell us about that? Now, this ought to give everybody, this ought to bring goosebumps up the back of your spine. What are the results? Over 250,000 babies are alive per year. You mean you had a 24% reduction in abortions? You're killing over 1 million a year? That's more than 250,000, isn't it? Yeah. 2006, unfortunately, the trend reversed. Voter turnout fell by 30% by those who called themselves Christians, 28.9 down to 20.5 million. Out of the 54 new freshmen sent to the U.S. House, only 31% were pro-life. In the Senate, 10, only 1. Only 1. In fact, the Baltimore Sun identified this Congress as the most pro-choice, pro-death Congress in the history of the Republic. But wait a second. Let's switch to an issue on homosexual marriage. 72% of Americans at that time thought marriage should only be between a man and a woman. But 90% of these freshman senators, well, they thought homosexual marriage was okay. Congress never reflects the values of the people. It only reflects the values of those who voted. Polling reveals that the liberals are even more focused on abortion than those who call themselves Christians. What about 2008? Wow, this is great. Christian voter turnout increased 66%, 34.1 million. Uh-oh. Guess what happened? On the exit polling, they asked them, why did you vote? What were the main things that caused you to vote? They didn't bring their biblical values to them. Only 6% thought abortion was a key issue that caused their vote to go one way or the other. Only 1% thought marriage was an issue. You mean after that Supreme Court made that decision just before this? Only 1%? No, we got to fix foreign affairs. We got to fix the economy. They're just voting like non-Christians, aren't they? Or at least what the world calls a Christian anyways. 57 new freshmen. Only 40% were pro-life. Senate, 14. Only 14% were pro-life. What about 2010? We had the highest evangelical voter turnout in recent years. And they also voted their values, not their pocketbooks. Okay? Exit polling, 30% said abortion was the driving issue. Of that, 22 out of 100 said they vote pro-life. Only 8 vote pro-death. What's the difference there? 14% advantage? Okay, so what were the results? 97. Remember 50-some was a decent-sized freshman class for the Congress? You got 97 here. 81 pro-life. That's 84%, the highest percentage for freshmen that we've had. 16 in the U.S. Senate, that's a pretty good size, right? 13 were pro-life, 81%. Yeah, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. When a wicked man rules, the people groan. You see, when you tell your neighbor when your neighbor votes using their pocketbook over morality, we lose on a lot of issues. So what about local elections? I don't have any more stats for after 2010, sorry. Most of this data came from David Barden, Wall Builders, has thousands and thousands of people working in those type of areas. A lot of good statistics, okay? But what about some local elections here in Seminole County? As you all know, I gave you all a little something last Wednesday, a little flyer on that. Now realize, this is just my opinion on a couple races. Officially, I'm supposed to say this is not officially endorsed by the congregation here at this location. Okay, fine. It's now stated. It's on YouTube. Now we're legal, right? Actually, we're legal anyways, but never mind on that. Okay. What about Seminole County School Board member for District 4? Did you know 2 out of the 3 candidates are very anti-biblical? Such as pro-abortion, pro-homosexual marriage. In fact, one of them is a homosexual teacher. He teaches the kids already. And he's running a school board member. Talks about his partner, Lewis, on his website. Equality, family values, promotes love. Yeah, well, okay. We got another one. She's got a PhD. She actually was executive director of elementary education. Well, look who endorses her and what's on her Facebook page. Well, not very good, folks. What about this? There's the 3 people running. Now, I don't think Stephanie Miller, the Democrat, has anybody running against her that's going to be significant, so the only choice you really got here is on this side, okay? You see the guy in the middle, Mike Miller? Why is he down there? He's not even called a conservative, is he? And yet he says, and he claims he's the most pro-life candidate running. That's a lie, folks. When you find his voting record and what he admitted to on live TV and things of that nature, he's lying to you. He's one of the few representatives in the Florida House, for the Republicans anyways, that voted against limiting funds to Planned Parenthood. He voted against it. And his excuse sounded like straight out of the Planned Parenthood playbook. You see, some say that Jesus did not spend much time talking about government or politics. Did he? What did he call Herod? In the Old Testament, what did the prophets do to King David? Nathan coming over. You're wrong on this. What about Saul, Samuel coming in? You're wrong on this. Okay? What constitutes politics? In fact, who defines what politics is? Marriage 20 years ago. Was that a political issue? No. 20 years ago, it was only a religious issue. Now the politician says, hey, that's one of our issues. You can't touch it. We can't? The Bible touches on it. We talk about it. Christians should say, if it's here in this book, I'm going to talk about it. What about no-fault divorce? Well, Matthew chapter 19 kind of takes care of that one, doesn't it? Jesus condemns no-fault divorce, and that's a big political issue in over 24 states today. They're trying to do some things on divorce. Too bad they're not using more biblical principles on that. Well, they're not. So where are you and your neighbors going to get your news? And where are you going to get information on where the candidates stand? Let me state it bluntly for us. If you cannot trust any denominationalist, now who are they? They have some fear of God, right? But if you can't trust them to tell you enough truth from this book so you can get to heaven and avoid hell, why would anybody in their right mind think they can trust the media, CBS, NBC, New York Times, Washington Post, all that? They don't have any fear of God. Why would you trust them to give you unbiased facts on any issue that matters? We have 2 flyers available for you to help you help your neighbors, maybe motivate your neighbors, okay, to use biblical principles in their voting. And where to find some more information on all kinds of topics, even when it's not a voting year. And on the back, we've got some really nice links to the Church of Christ websites, okay? These flyers also have links to biblical information that will lead them to the truth so that their souls can wind up in a good place. Here's some of the links you see over there to Miraculous Bible, and there's the other one over about news that goes to this one right here. We have some flyers here about God Said Vote. You all may have seen this up on our bulletin boards for the last 10 years, whatever, okay? And then on the back of here, more links to some excellent, excellent websites. You might want to use those for your neighbors and use this voting season as an excuse to talk to them about the Bible, okay? You see, let's go back in this 20th century. The 20th century has some of the worst atrocities by the governments in modern history. All because people in places like Germany and Russia forgot to be citizens. They forgot about Proverbs 29:2. Even Mussolini, they said he was wonderful. Why? Oh, he makes the trains run on time. Some leaders today in America have very high ratings in polls and stuff because the economy is good, and yet their regime is totally corrupt. So ask ourselves this: will your next congressman or school board counselor, governor, or president, will they be a sincere atheist, an honest homosexual, a loving pedophile, a concerned rapist? Or will we return to the moral principles of a George Washington? Now, can we as Christians stand by while innocent people are being killed? Babies? What about Proverbs chapter 24, 11 and 12? Deliver those who are drawn towards death. Then it goes on to say, well, if you say, surely we did not know this, does not he who weighs the hearts consider it, and he who keeps your soul, does he not know it? And will he not render to each man according to his deeds? How is your soul doing with what God has blessed you with? This country is more blessed than any other country on the planet. And one of the things we're blessed with is the right to choose who our elected officials are. But if we can help you with being a stronger Christian in any area of your life, whether voting or some other issue, or if we can help you become a Christian, please come forward as we sing this song for your encouragement.